Now, welcome. So, a few things to cover today. We have Rúaidhrí O'Connor in Brisbane, where it has finished just in the last 15 minutes or so. Lions 54, Queensland Reds 12. We have Cian Tracey in Tbilisi. That is ahead of Ireland, Georgia on Saturday evening. Good few talking points there. He's been talking to Richard Cockrell, the head coach. So we'll chat to Cian. And then Chris Busby, now retired referee, fairly explosive post aimed squarely in the direction of the IRFU. So we'll touch on that. Our rugby coverage, as ever, with thanks to Energia. They sponsor rugby in Ireland at all levels, at grassroots with the Energia AIL, and as official energy partner to Leinster, Connacht, the Irish men's and women's teams, and their Rugby for All initiative welcomes everyone of all abilities to participate in the game. To learn more about their exclusive home energy offer, energia.ie/rugby is the place to go. So, first port of call, let's go to Brisbane. Queensland Reds 12, Lions 52. Rúaidhrí O'Connor is there. Just gone full time at the Suncorp Stadium in Brisbane. 8 tries to 2. Rud, you're there, loud and clear. Hello.
Yeah, sounds like you're going global tonight, Joe. Or today. It's tonight here.
What a flex, by the way. O'Connor in Brisbane. Cian Tracey hanging out with Cockrell in Tbilisi. What more do people want here?
Yeah, just watching Finn Russell playing with his 2 kids. And he's got one of his daughters in his arms. And my headline on my piece is Lions sweating over Finn Russell's wrist. But it looks fine as he swings his baby over his head. So, yeah, no, it's good to be here. And it was another interesting night, albeit these games are starting to take on a bit of a pattern where these kind of local sides are not really able to keep up with the Lions for any more than about 20 minutes.
Well, they really are. What would you say of the first 20 minutes when, like, there's a bit of kind of substance to the game in some respects as opposed to the last 20 minutes? What do you make of it?
Yeah, like you always have to break a team, no matter who you're playing. And the Reds, I was out with Les Kiss and Matt Fessler, their hooker, the other day, and like they were really excited about this game. They'd made a plan. You know, they finished Super Rugby 3 weeks ago. They came in like, you know, it's the first time they played in front of a big crowd here for a long time. And they're really determined to make a mark. And I thought they started really well. It's very windy here. It was like the conditions were tricky enough. And they made life awkward for the Lions, who, again, I think started slowly, like they did against Argentina, like they did against the Western Force, made mistakes. It was quite reminiscent of the Argentina game in some ways. And I suppose it was a close enough team. The scrum wasn't as good. The scrum was tricky tonight. The line out wasn't great. They're working the backfield. Van der Merwe got exposed a couple of times, which I think is going to happen if he's on the left wing because teams know it's not his strong point. We can see what he can do when he gets the ball in his hand. He's awesome. But when he's made the turn, he struggles. And I think Les Kiss and his team showed a couple of flaws. Again, there was a restart that didn't go as well as before. There was lineouts that went astray. But you still have to remember, it's only the third game, and they only had one training session between the game on Saturday and tonight's game. So, like, there's going to be teething problems. That's part of the challenge of the Lions. And I suppose what Andy Farrell would be pretty pleased about, and he looked pretty upset in the first 20 minutes up in the coach's box. He looked fairly annoyed with what he was seeing. But the players did kind of think their way through it, found a way. And I think a lot of the test match players that we thought were in this team, like Atoje, who was exceptional, like Gibson Park and Russell, who looked like they'd been playing together for a long time. I thought Gibson Park, it looks like that patience they showed with his injury has paid off because he looked really slick with ball in hand. And I think it probably reinforced some of Farrell's big decisions rather than maybe Jack Morgan stepped out from the crowd with the way he played after a tricky opening. But that first 20 minutes was still, you have to weight these things, I guess. That was the hard part of the game. And they made a lot of mistakes under pressure. And I guess the Wallabies will be able to sustain that pressure for 80 minutes, or at least across, close to 80 minutes.
Yeah.
And they've got to be able to cope with it a bit better than they did in that first 20. But I suppose the way they figured it out is the plus point.
Yeah, it is. For people, obviously, who didn't see the game, busy elsewhere, like in that kind of first 25, 30 minutes or so, because the Reds scored their second try in 27 minutes, Josh Fluke, depending, you're either looking a bit at Van der Merwe or on the TV commentary, they felt Hugh Jones vacated the backfield. But regardless, a little Gruber kicked through, and that was their second try. Their first try, Their number 12, who was really brilliant, Paisami, he busted them through the middle, Porter and Stewart in midfield. They both got shoulders on him, but it was kind of a trend in that first 25, 30 minutes. The Reds were coming out on top in a lot of collisions, and ultimately Tumanga Allen finished. But they won a lot of contacts in the 22 after that Paisami break. But you mentioned scrum. Lions pinged twice in the scrum, Will Stewart once, Porter another time. Line out was scrappy. Again, that is very forgivable, I think, when a scratch side come together. Same with the restarts. I don't see that as a big worry. It's just a thing they'll just have to sort out at some stage over the next couple of weeks. And then there were kind of echoes of the Argentina game where the Lions overplayed their hand at times. Elliot Daly on the end of a really good move, one extra pass too many, ball went to ground. Aki, twice, once to Tom Curry, once to Will Stewart, right on the line, little pop pass, went to ground. And actually, anytime Aki carried, with that kind of physicality that he can, not least in the build-up to try at the start of the second half, where he made about 10 metres post-contact and it led to the Itoje try. Anytime he went direct, he was brilliant. So that was kind of the story of that first 25, 30. All those kind of little things adding up. I don't know what to read into it, really.
It's hard because when they did those things against the test team, they got punished. But against a Super Rugby team that don't have a number of their best internationals, like Paisami was their best player. He is one of Joe Schmidt's Wallabies. Like, he could face them in the test series. He's been released for this game. But they're missing Fraser McWright, who caused so much havoc against Ireland in November. They're missing Wilson, the Wallabies captain. They're both playing for Australia against Fiji on Sunday. So, there's not a huge amount of depth and quality within Australian rugby, and certainly not on the level of the best players from the four countries that are providing the Lions. So there is a mismatch of play. So, in this scenario, you can have a bad 20 minutes and you can make those mistakes, and then you can just kind of, do a Gary Keegan breath and figure it out, because the opposition, I think John Fogarty talked at halftime about taking their legs. Like, they're not as fit as you. Their bench isn't as good as your bench. You're bringing on Ellis Genge. You're bringing on Luke Cowan-Dickey. You're bringing on James Ryan for his first Lions appearance. So it's not like, and it's it's the reason that they still remember the 1971 team here who took down the Lions on their first appearance on Australian soil during that tour. Well, the reason that team is famous and remembered is because it rarely happens that the midweek or these teams in the build-up can beat the Lions. And I don't think the Lions are going to slip up again in any of these build-up games. Yeah. Maybe the team that goes out against the Pacifica team during the test series, when that's really going to be a scratch side. But this team has enough quality, enough at stake. Like, these players are all still fighting for test jerseys. So they should be putting 50 points on this team. And Matt Canston, in fairness to him, said that before the first game. He said, look, we're an international team against club sides. We should be beating these teams well. And in the end, they're getting there. It's a little bit clunky, to use an Andy Farrellism, in how they're getting there, and desperate. If you watch the YouTube videos, if you hear him in press conference, he talks a lot about players not getting desperate. And I thought in the first 20 minutes, they probably were pushing passes. They were trying to score on the third phase, when if they waited for the fifth phase, they'd just naturally break their opponents. And that's going to come as well.
Yeah.
But the good stuff was good. Like, Gibson Park and Russell, nailed on. That's locked in now. And the two English halfbacks coming off the bench look really good as well. So that's a nice combination. And Itoje, there was obviously, when he wasn't picked for the first game, there was a little bit of talk about how he might be under a bit of pressure. But, look how good he was tonight. There's absolutely no way he doesn't start the test. He looked like the captain tonight. He looked like the player who dominated test matches for the Lions in 2017. And that's encouraging that he's finding form at just the right time as well.
Yeah. When they clicked, their running rugby was really impressive and eye-catching. And again, does a test side shut that down somehow? I don't know, but it looked really good. It looked like Ireland at times, when Ireland were super fluid under Farrell, actually. Like the Porter try on kind of half hour to go 2 points clear. The Van der Merwe try, Conan really good there, created an overlap, but like the build-up play to it was really good. So, you've got good angles, lots of runners, loop plays, Aki out the back door always an option. Like, when that stuff clicked, they were making 15, 20, 25 metres with ease and with a panache and a confidence, which was really good.
Yeah, and you see Tommy Freeman and even Van der Merwe, who I'd be fairly critical of because you can see how good he is when he gets up and running. But there was one time he joined the line, and they're both. Sorry, what I was trying to say was that both of them, you could see them popping up in midfield, taking on the ball as a first receiver or a second receiver, having multiple touches. And there was one time Van der Merwe got the ball and he had the Reds tight head prop Tumag Allen in front of him. And like normally he just either run through him or run around them, but I do hand Van der Merwe thing and just go through. But he almost looked like, I need to show Andy Farrell I can do this, and he shipped it on, and it ended up going to the deck. And I'd say Farrell would say to him in the review, say, look, I know I want you to pass the ball sometimes, but at the same time, be true to yourself. If you think you can go around him on the outside and that's the best route to scoring, that's your decision. Make make the right call. But I guess there's a bit of them trying to show Farrell that they can do what he wants them to do. And I think Freeman looked far more comfortable in that, and he looks like a real live option for the test. That's a real tight call between him and Hansen. But you're right, like they're only 3 games in. They had no training preparation for this game, really. And yet, yes, against the team who can't bring the same level of line speed and are not going to be able to match them. They got Aki running at them physically. Yes, that caveat has to be there for these games, and we can't get carried away. There was a lot of good, fluid stuff. And it's noticeable that he hasn't paired the 2 Irish centres or the 2 Scottish centres. Is he trying to build those relationships? We did Ireland-Scotland combination at half-back today. He's determined to try and mix and match and not just go with that. I'm going to pick the Ireland pack and the Scottish back line or something along those lines. He's trying to blend them. And it looks like they're building those relationships despite that lack of training time. So it's encouraging. But you wouldn't get overly carried away by it either. But they should win these games, and they should win this test series. So they're trending, I think, towards being able to have a really good performance in 2.5 weeks' time when they face the Wallabies right back here. That's one of the things here. This was a chance to get a look at Suncorp. It's where they'll play the Wallabies first up, and they'll be happy with how they're trending. But I think Farrell would like to see them start the game well and really put a team to the sword early and not have to have a halftime chat and him make 5 changes after 51 minutes. I think he'd like to kind of just put the foot down from the start and really have a complete performance, because that's a hallmark of his Irish team when they're at their best as well.
Completely. I mean, the first 20 minutes is the game. There's no point in watching the last 20 minutes of these matches or last half hour, or really second half in some respects. The true test is the first 20 minutes. And they haven't really been able to impose themselves on either of these 2 games on Australian soil. And the Argentina game was the Argentina game. You mentioned Gibson Park at 9 and Finn Russell nailed on. Certainly Jack Conan's getting very close to being nailed on, isn't he? Like a great carry early on, like just a kind of bish-bosh, ran over someone. He made the most carries in the game. And then for the Duhan van der Merwe try on 34 minutes, he's sort of open side of a ruck, which is on the left-hand touchline. And he works around and great hands to give the last pass, creates the overlap, last pass to Van der Merwe. So, that bit of quality too. And even on the TV coverage, they were saying like that is a symptom of a guy who understands this system kind of intrinsically. And so that's probably 8, 9, 10 we have nailed down, no?
Yeah, and it's nice, like, again, having your number 8. It's an underrated skill, but a number 8 who knows his scrum half and vice versa at the base of that scrum is it's an important kind of one of those combinations that we probably don't talk about an awful lot, but that little level of understanding is probably important as well. And I thought he was very good. Yeah, he wasn't happy with his performance off the bench last Saturday, so I think he wanted to make a mark. But he's also an experienced Test match lion who played 3 times in South Africa at number 8 as well. And he's really the only out and out number 8 in this squad. And like Pollock did a load of nice things on Saturday, but I still don't think he's a Test match level number 8. I think he can do a job for you at 7, and he can do a load of really good things. But I think to have the physicality of a Caelan Doris or a Jack Conan, I'd say Ben Earl was pretty frustrated to come on in the centre and not get a run in the back row. He'll probably play on Saturday. But Conan, I think, definitely has 2 hands on that jersey. And yeah, a lot of nice subtle touches. I think he was pipped at the line by Tommy Freeman. I think Tommy Freeman got one more carry that just took him past Jack Conan as the top carrier, but he was joint top tackler with Jack Morgan as well. So it wasn't just getting his hands on the ball. He was also industrious without the ball. So he'll be really happy with his night's work, and he always looked like he was going to be a Test player. And I think it was a lot, as I said earlier, like a lot of the Test players stepped up and performed here. and kind of almost cemented that impression rather than someone coming from the outside and taking their place. I mean, Morgan maybe put a bit of pressure on. Freeman puts a bit of pressure on. Hansen, that's a bit of a 50-50. Midfield, I think Aki is definitely going to be in the 23, just whether they start them or whether they go with Tuipulotu. But it's starting to, I think, become clearer in our heads as to what.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Farrell already had an idea, but we're starting to see players kind of just put their hands up. Chessum, I thought, was very good alongside of Itoje. I'd love to see him get a run at 6 because I think he could really do a job for them there and help out with that line out, because the line out hasn't looked as good when they've had Tom Curry at 6 because they lack that extra jumper.
Yeah. Aki, almost akin to the World Cup, looks like he gets his body right for these big moments in his career. So I mean, he just looked full of kind of bombast, really. Give us some more then on 6. You mentioned Chessum. We had Tom Curry today. They tried Tyke Byrne there. I know you were talking to Will and you were saying you sort of feel at his age those kind of 6 days are maybe a little bit behind him. He's settled into second row. So who is likely to be alongside Jack Conan there? Who's going to be 6 at this stage?
I still think it's open. They did a bit of a mix on before the game because they're moving tomorrow. So Tyke Byrne was actually up for interview. That will appear later in the week, but that means he'll be involved in the Waratahs game. We can safely assume to some degree. So I think he'd like another crack at the second row and a chance to kind of see Joe McCarthy's performance last Saturday and try and up it. I think he's definitely a contender for he's a strong contender for the 23, but I wouldn't have him inked in for the test team just yet. And I think Chessum just has that extra bit of dynamism and energy at this stage of his career. He really bangs Ollie Chessum. Like, he hits hard, he carries hard, he's a good line out forward, and he also knows Itoje well. So there's a nice bit of combination there as well. So if you put Itoje, Chessum, and Joe McCarthy into the same back 5 of a scrum, you have an awful lot of power, dynamism, collision winning, breakdown menace, line out capacity as well. It's a really potent combination. You don't lose a lot if you go Tyke Byrne. That's a really tight call. And I'd say Byrne has a lot of credit in Andy Farrell's bank as well. So that's going to work in his favor, and I think a good performance next Saturday will change the dynamics a little bit as well. But I think Chessum did a lot today to put himself in the frame, and Byrne has a bit of work to do, but I still think he'll be in the 23. I don't see him slipping out of that altogether, because I think Scott Cummings, the Scottish lock, he lost a lot of ground last Saturday. So yeah, I think Chessum's in a really good spot and looks like a really kind of player who's arrived in excellent form. He went deep with Leicester as well, so he's kind of battle hardened after knockout rugby at the end of the season. So he's put it up to Byrne a little bit, but nothing to say Byrne couldn't be man of the match on Saturday, and we'll have a completely different discussion after that game, Yeah,
talking to Eddie O'Sullivan earlier in the week, we were just remarking on how heightened the whole thing is. There aren't many sample sizes, there aren't many games. Someone misses a tackle or does something good, and it's like, well, that's them in, that's them out. And equally, we're trying to second guess all of these selections, and some of the time it could be as simple as, my hamstring's a little bit tight, I'm just going to sit out Saturday, I'll play Wednesday, and then, okay, Graham will switch. All these things are happening on the fly, and we're possibly over-reading into different things. When do you think we're going to see, 12, 13 of the 15 test side play together? When can we kind of circle in the calendar, that's the game? Is it going to be as late as the Brumbies or earlier?
Oh, Brumbies. Well, Brumbies, you say as late as the Brumbies. That's this day next week.
Oh, is it? Okay, grand. We're moving.
Like, he's not going to roll out. Like, it was funny. Andy Farrell was asked about on whatever. Sorry, I'm losing track of the days. He was asked before this game, are you worried that the lads would get desperate because they're running out of chances? And Farrell looked at Tom English, the BBC journalist, incredulously. I said, running out of chances? They're only getting started. But they're not really. Like, they've only got this game Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, and then we're at the first test. So it's quite tight. And we're still because of the way that Leinster went deep and they've had a few injuries, James Ryan is still only getting his chance today. So even if he wanted to put Byrne on the bench tonight, he had to give Ryan a chance. And Ryan will come into the team as well on Saturday, you would presume. So we're still at Blair Kinghorn hasn't played yet. Hugo Keenan had to cry off tonight because of a stomach bug.
Yeah.
So we're still at the point where he hasn't played yet. Elliot Daly goes off with an injury, and there's 2 fullbacks who haven't got a go yet. They're both vying for position for Saturday. So even next Wednesday is the ideal time to do it, because then you've got a 10-day window to kind of start, to ramp down and then ramp back up for the first test. But there might be someone making their first starts in that game in a Hugo Keenan or a Blair Kinghorn, and they're kind of in that scenario that Rob Kearney discussed with you from 2013, where he just ran out of time. He went on the tour injured, and by the time he got there, he'd lost out to Lee Halfpenny, and Elliot Daly has kind of stolen the march on both of those lads, albeit he looked like the more serious of the two kind of forearm injuries. So you'd be worried for him, and it'd be pity because he was playing very well. So yeah, I would be saying that because, Itoje will now stand down. I think Saturday's selection will be really interesting. Who's on the bench? I'd say Dan Sheehan might be on the bench. He'll come into the starting team, I'd say, next Wednesday. And Wednesday, I'd say, we'll have the bones of a test team. But because it's such a shortened window, we might not see a full test team at all. He might have to go into that first test having not played a 15 or, but I think the core will be out next Wednesday. I have a piece with Ben Darwin in today's paper. He's a cohesion expert. He's a former Wallabies prop. He's built a company called Gainline Analytics that basically have done the metrics on cohesion and put a value on cohesion. And he's really interesting on it. But he reckoned it was always going to be Wednesday, the way the games fall.
Yeah.
And he also said it was quite funny. He said, like, look, if in doubt, if he's starting to panic or if things aren't going right, he can always just go and pick 14 Irish players like Gatlin did with Wales all those years ago. It's kind of, he has that in his back pocket. If it goes wrong in the first test, well, Tyburn and these boys can all come back in because they know the system. So it looks like they're getting it. And that's pretty impressive on the fly. But he does have the value or the comfort of being able to pick an Irish heavy team if he doesn't feel like the cohesion is coming along as quickly as he wants to.
Right, great. General vibes, happy camp, media and team all getting on. It's rolling along nicely, or any mumblings of discontent?
No, certainly no mumblings of discontent. They don't have time to be discontented at this stage. It's genuinely been relentless since we arrived. Like, they're flying to Sydney tomorrow, naming a team at 8:30 at night because it's the only window they have to do so, which will be about, I think, 10:30 in Ireland, maybe 9:30 in the morning for your time tomorrow. Straight into the Waratahs, then Canberra. So and I think everyone's got a chance now. He's given everyone a go, apart from Keenan and Kinghorn. Everyone can say they've got a decent crack at the whip, although some of them won't get much more of a chance after this. So that's when the grumbles might start. But it does seem from the outside, seeing them whizzing around Brisbane on their scooters, they've been embracing the e-scooters, which has surprised me. Nearly got run over by Luke Cowan-Dickey, and Joe McCarthy on an e-scooter is a sight to behold, because that's a lot of weight and at a decent lick. But yeah, it seems to be pretty happy so far. But they're still a little bit at the honeymoon stage, and it's only when that test selection comes out and players might start to think about the fact that they didn't get a fair crack. But it feels like they've all been given a decent go of it so far, and Farrell is very good at keeping that togetherness. And even the bits we're seeing in those tour documentaries, the messaging he's giving them, I think they're enjoying working with him. Both the Irish players and the non-Irish players, they're getting a chance to work with a guy who's famed for that kind of building that atmosphere. So yeah, no inclination of an unhappy camp, but I'll be the first to let you know, Joe, when we hear about it, if it does go south. But I think as long as they're winning as well, there's a bit of feel good. They're happy enough. So, and I say they're tired as well, though. It's because it is
grueling. Yeah,
like, it's grueling. I don't think there's a lot of time for, like, we're hearing about the committees and all that sort of stuff, but there's not a lot of time for fun here. It's very much they're on. It's work, and I wouldn't say they're getting a huge amount of time to see a lot of the cities, albeit he's not training twice a day in the way that Gatlin might have in the previous times. It's kind of mornings, trying to give him a bit of downtime, but it's intense.
And how significant a presence are they in the Australian media?
It's growing, but look, State of Origin's on next Wednesday, the same time as the Brumbies game, and that's a far bigger deal. There was a big supplement in all the Rupert Murdoch-owned papers today. The Courier Mail here, the local paper, had a big supplement. They got 47,000 here, which is the biggest crowd that the Reds have gotten for years upon years. There was 45 in Perth, which is not rugby country. There was a lot more kind of locally based Irish people in particular in Perth, but here it felt like a local crowd, albeit a very quiet one. The atmosphere wasn't great and it wasn't very hostile. I think Sydney will be a big crowd. So they're getting interest, and it's definitely a thing. I just happened to be passing a couple of the players yesterday, and there was a woman working on a construction site who nearly threw herself over the hoarding to try and get their autograph for her son. So they're getting spotted, but it's definitely not like New Zealand where they'd be very much kind of the centre of attention. They're still having to fight a battle. When Origin's over next Wednesday, I'd say, and the tests are in full view, I think they'll come more front and center. But at the moment, there's definitely a presence, but not the main event right now. Like Origin's massive. It's amazing how much coverage that. Like they're still a week out and they're getting reams. Every bulletin, it's like reams and reams of team speculation. Right. Everyone's obsessed with it's a decider. So that's the big deal in town at the moment. And there's still AFL going on as well. So it's a crowded market, much like our own at the moment. Albeit it sounds like the Lions is holding its own back home, but there's a lot going on in Australia as well as Ireland.
Okay, very good. Listen, you're a busy man, lots to do. Thank you so much, Rúaidhrí O'Connor. Cheers.